can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, here's Jeannie.
Loud and clear.
I'm going to switch chairs. Let me move this out of the way. Could you stand here, please? Thank you. Take it on. Let's see how. Okay, Kevin, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, sounds good.
Good.
We have an Andrew in attendance. Hello, Andrew.
Good evening. Hi, Mr. Friedman. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. I'm the secretary. I'm not sure that did you get an invitation from someone else along the road?
Yes, I represent about 20 or so homeowners.
Oh, gotcha. Yep, I do recall.
And your last name is?
Campanelli.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Good evening.
I'm Jeannie Goldberg. I'm chairperson. Hi.
Hi. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And it's working, Kevin.
I know. The planets have aligned. Wonderful.
I had trouble with my audio for the last conference. So we are testing early.
Oh, good. It looks good. Sounds good. Jeannie, are you going to want me to do the reading of the of that piece?
Yes, please, if you don't mind, Kevin.
Not a problem. Let me just make sure I have it accessible.
By special request. Is that maybe Patty?
Somebody has peeped and arrived. Says Patty.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We hear you and see
Hi,
you.
Patty.
Jeannie, I see you and I see you completely.
Good. And you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good.
Are we the only two on?
We have
Great.
Mr. Campanelli, the attorney for the neighbors.
Okay.
Just to check, you want me to read the public hearing bit of Town of Saugerty zoning appeal? We'll hold public hearing now.
Yes.
That's what you want me with the purpose of the hearing, et cetera. You want me to read that?
Correct, please.
Okay.
For the June, I believe it was June 3rd, or maybe it was July.
July
6th.
July 6th.
Correct. But it was sent out in June. Correct.
Right. Yep.
Good.
All right, I can read that.
Thank you.
Jeannie, does he have to read the whole thing or just the purpose of the hearing?
I believe it would be good if he read the whole thing.
Okay. Okay.
Just so everyone is clear.
Hello, Mr. Campanelli.
Good evening. How are you?
Good.
This is Patty Kelly, who is the vice chairperson of the zoning board.
Nice to meet you.
And there will be more of us.
There better be.
Yes, two does not make a quorum. But I believe I have spoken to everyone, and they are planning to be here.
Jeannie, I just saw your recent emails about something. I didn't have a chance to talk to you about it because I just saw it, so I'm not going to mention it now, but I just want you to know I did see it, but just as I opened it up right now.
Good. I'm sorry it was so late.
I know. I understand. I understand.
This is the way 2020 is going.
I'm very glad Kevin's going to read that because I don't think I could have been able to. I'm coughing like crazy.
Oh, Patty.
I know.
Sorry.
It's like coming right back.
Joe Mayone will probably come in by telephone.
Okay,
Henry may or may not come in by telephone.
okay. We're still pretty early. We just wanted to make sure we got it working.
We are. I asked Kevin to come early so that he could make sure that I could be heard.
And he's not on vacation. I
No,
don't know why they said that.
That
the
was a
rumors of
nasty
my
rumor.
vacation.
Have been greatly exaggerated.
Exactly. And Ron is on board. Here's Scott.
Hi,
Hello,
Ron.
Ron.
Hi, here. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to have you, Ron.
Thank
Mr.
you
Olson is
for
on.
sending me the invitation.
And Mr. Olson is here.
I'm here, but my video seems to be giving me technical difficulties. I'll try to work on that.
Okay.
Oh, please, we like your smiling face.
That's good. Thank you.
Who is Askta? Do we know?
I don't know.
All right. I will ask who is identifying there in the screen as ASKTA.
I would bet it might be Tamara.
Okay.
Tamara,
Oh,
are
yeah.
you here?
Right. Ask Tamara.
And Mr. Crosby is here.
Yes, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good. And Henry is also here. Good.
Hi,
Hi,
guys.
Henry.
Hi, Patty, Jeannie, Kevin.
Hi.
Hello, hello. Hello, Henry.
We have the zoning board has all missed each other meeting in person for 6 months, 7 months, however long it is.
No, not that long.
Longer.
April, May, June, July. Yeah, close. We didn't have a couple of meetings in there, so
It's been a while.
it's been a while.
Yes,
I haven't seen any of you.
I
Very sad.
know.
We have a phone caller, an 845
Hello?
ending in 40. Hello, are you?
Hello?
Who's that? Yes, who's that calling in
This
the
is-
phone?
Yes, this is Tamara. I'm in the unenviable position of being able to watch you and hear you on the computer, but not speak. So I have you on the computer, and I'm also speaking on my home phone.
Got it.
Welcome to 2020, Tamara.
Yeah.
Technology is great when
Murphy's
it
Law.
works.
And Gina and or Doug Pearson are with us.
Yes.
Mr.
Hey,
Olson,
Scott.
your smiling face.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to switch computers, so luckily I had two here. So this is
I have a phone in caller phone number ending in 28. Could you identify yourself? George Redden. Hey, George.
Welcome, George.
How's everybody doing?
Good, George.
Hey, Henry.
Patty, how are you?
We're still 5 minutes early, so we'll give other people time.
Holly, hello.
Hello.
Hi, Holly.
Hello, Holly.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Oh, I can hear Jeannie very well tonight.
I know, isn't it exciting?
It's wonderful.
I've reformed. Our last meeting, my video was fine, but my audio was terrible. So we worked on it.
We have a Sarah in the house.
Yes, that's Sarah from, she
Sarah
works for,
Coleman.
yep.
Yes. Good evening.
Right.
Good evening, Sarah.
Hello, Sarah.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, how you doing, Dan?
Jan. Good.
Dan,
Kim.
Hello, how are you?
Hello. We have a couple people named 8.
Yeah. Hello, John.
Mr. Lyons.
Seems to be in a muted condition. There he goes.
There we go. How are you?
Up,
Good.
John.
Well, I can hear you very well now, Gene. You did a great job.
Thanks to my husband, the techno expert.
So can you believe it's totally dark out now? We're starting this meeting. How things have changed in a month.
you bet.
And
Start.
daylight savings doesn't even start until November 1st.
Wow.
Yes.
Then it'll get darker even faster.
Mm-hmm.
But it will be light earlier for those
That's
of us
true.
early birds.
I see Mr. Boglin, but I also see a C0POMPK. If you could unmute and just identify yourself.
I'm Kathy Pomponio. I'm the project manager with Verizon Wireless.
How do you spell your last name, Kathy? And is that with a C or a K?
It's with a K, and it's P as in Peter, O M as in Mary, P as in Peter, O N as in Nancy, I-O.
Thank you. I see Tim Scott, right?
Hello, Tim.
I'm here. Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
We give it one more minute.
Yeah, it looks like everybody's here, so
Jeannie, if I could just make a request for the recording, and so I can edit at the appropriate place, just make a formal announcement that this commences the opening of the meeting, and then I'll know to start, trim out all of these little introductions here.
Very good.
All right. See, Mike. I have looks like another call-in person with an area code 941. Could you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, this is Brett Begellen, Tarpon Towers.
Oh, okay. I thought you were on video, Brett. Did I miss that?
Yeah, I am, but my computer audio is atrocious.
You're not the only one. No, 2 is Brett.
And the good old 914 area code that we remember.
Oh, it's 941.
941.
914. Oh, okay.
Did Joe Mayon come on, Gene?
I haven't seen Joe yet. Joe, are you here?
Now, all the phone ins are accounted for.
Okay.
George, Jamar, and Brett. So.
Okay. Joe said he would be on phone. So we'll give him one more minute and we'll start.
I'm just gonna make, before we formally start the meeting, if I can, Jeannie, just to tell people I'm gonna be, muting them. They can throw up, their hand in a chat if they have something to say, but obviously you can see that, all the shots as you see fit, but just to cut down on the outside noises, be prepared to be muted. Those of you on phone, if you need to be unmuted, it's *6. Mute yourself. It's the same command.
I think that may eliminate one of the things I was going to say, Kevin, but
I'm stepping on your turf.
be my guest. Okay, I think we should start. And I will start by saying good evening. Welcome to the October 5th, 2020 meeting of the Town of Saugerties Zoning Board of Appeals. I would now like to ask ZBA Secretary Kevin Freeman, who is hosting this meeting, to make any necessary announcements.
Okay, thank you. I'm in the process of muting just to cut down on the background noise here. If anybody needs to, for any reason, or wants to raise their hand, they can do so in the chat function. If you're familiar with WebEx, or not familiar with WebEx, up at the top, there's a couple little fly-out circular buttons that you can change the view. You can change it from the postage stamps to the speaker view. And down at the bottom, you should be able to chat and such. And I think that's it. If anybody has any difficulties, they can call me. The cell number is in the invitation, or throw out a chat personally to me or to everyone, and just let me know if you're having any problems.
Okay, if no one has questions, I'm now going to call the October 5th meeting and continued public hearing of the Saugerties Zoning Board of Appeals to order. I would like to begin with a roll call of the members of the Zoning Board. I am Jeannie Goldberg, Chairperson of the Zoning Board. I'm sorry? I heard someone. No. Also present are Patty Kelly, who's Vice Chairperson, Tim Scott, Holly Strutt, Henry Rua, and I hope Joe Mayone, who is on by telephone. Joe, are you here? Okay, I'm sure Joe will be joining us, but until then, we need 3 members of our zoning board to form a quorum, and we have 5 people present. So I am declaring a quorum present and the meeting can begin. I am designating Holly Strutt, who is our alternate, to join the regular board for this meeting. As Henry Rua, a regular board member, was not present for the initial 2020 Verizon cell tower presentations. The only application we have for tonight's meeting is Tarpon Towers 2 LLC and Cellco Partnership DBA Verizon Wireless, who propose to install and operate a 120-foot monopole tower structure with related equipment on the land of Mount Marion Fire Department at 766 Kings Highway in Saugerties. We are now continuing the public hearing for this application that was begun on July 6, 2020. As you know, the public hearing is continued open on this application. It has been continued at several of our meetings since July 6th, the first one. At this time, I would like to ask our board secretary, Kevin Freeman, to read the original public hearing notice. Kevin, please.
Okay. The Town of Saugerty Zoning Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing at 7 p.m. on July 6, 2020 for the purpose of discussing and getting public input on an application by Tarpon Towers II LLC and Cellco Partnership DBA at Verizon Wireless to install and operate a new communications facility on the property of Mount Marion Fire Department, 766 Kings Highway, Saugerty, New York. Purpose of the hearing. Tarpon Towers II is proposed installation of a 120-foot tall monopole tower and related antenna on the site of the Mount Marion Fire Department to enhance wireless service in the area. The Town of Saugerty zoning law requires the Zoning Board of Appeals, ZBA, to decide whether the zoning law applies to the projects located on the lands of another governmental entity, such as the fire department. The ZBA must consider the balance of interest between the town and the fire department in accordance with factors established by the New York State Court of Appeals in the case of matter of Monroe v. City of Rochester, 72 NY 2D 338. The DBA will also consider the appropriateness of use and area variance should it be determined that the proposed action is subject to the zoning law. The ZBA will consider the 9 factors set forth in the Monroe case as they relate to the proposed tower, and will also consider a finding that the proposed tower is immune from the provisions of the Town of Saugerty zoning law. Therefore, no variances are required, nor are any referrals to other agencies except the DEC. This public hearing is being conducted to consider any comments from interested citizens regarding the proposed action. The July 6th meeting will be held remotely using WebEx. Login information will be provided with the Town of Saugerty's website. Written comments may be sent by July 1st to ZBA Town Hall, 4 High Street, Saugerty, New York 12477, or by email to kfreeman@saugertysny.gov.
Thank you, Kevin. Do I see Joe Mayone in by telephone?
I just joined, Jeannie, yes.
Okay. Joe is the last member, number 6 of our Zoning Board of Appeals. As stated in this notice, one purpose of the public hearing is for the board to solicit and accept comment from the public with regard to the question as to whether the proposed project qualifies for immunity from the Town of Saugerty's zoning law, and in particular, with regards to our applying to this project the balancing test set forth in the New York State Court of Appeals decision in a case called Matter of Monroe versus the City of Rochester. The balancing of interest test sets forth, identifies 9 separate factors to be considered by this board in making a determination as to whether the proposed project qualifies for immunity from our town zoning law because this project is proposed to be located on property owned by the Mount Marion Fire Department. The ZBA has thus far received comment from the applicant's counsel, from an attorney representing numerous citizens living in the vicinity of the site of the proposed project, and from other members of the public. At our meeting this evening, we will continue the public hearing and we will accept further comment from the public. I'm sorry, this is a little long, but it's important. At the conclusion of the public hearing session tonight, the board intends to entertain motions to close that portion of the public hearing which pertains to accepting comment on the issue of immunity of this project from our local zoning law and conduct of the balancing of interest test from Monroe. That motion will also propose to extend the period for accepting written comment on the immunity from zoning question for an additional 8 days until Tuesday, October 13th, 2020. This will afford all concerned one additional opportunities to submit comments to the board on this issue. The motion will also propose that the portion of the public hearing that regards the applicant's application for area variances and a use variance shall remain open and be continued to our meeting scheduled for Monday, November 2nd, 2020. It is, believe me, this board's desire to expeditiously complete its review of this application and to issue a final determination. In pursuit of that goal, it is the board's intention at this time to make a determination at our November 2nd meeting on the question of the immunity of this proposed project from the zoning law. If the project is determined to be immune from our zoning law, then this application will be concluded, as neither a use variance nor area variances will be required of the applicants. If the project is determined to be subject to our zoning law and not immune, then the board will proceed with its review of the pending area and use variance application. In that case, at our November 2nd meeting, we will continue that portion of the public hearing which pertains to the application for the use variance and area variances. If the public has additional comments on the variances, please be prepared to deliver your comments to us either at the public hearing session on November 2nd or deliver them in writing to us between now and the November 2nd meeting. At the conclusion of the public hearing session on November 2nd, the board intends to close the public hearing on the variances. Thereafter, the board will proceed with its review of the application for use and area variances and work toward issuance of a, decision on those applications. It is always possible that our planned time limit for the disposition of this matter may be altered by unforeseen circumstances or events. But the schedule that I have outlined this evening is one which the board intends to try to adhere to as best it can. We will now continue the public hearing. Following comments from the public, I will ask that ZBA members ask any questions of the applicant. And then the representatives of the applicants may further address the board if they so wish. At any time, the board's consultants may ask questions or make comments as well. I will open it to the public. As Kevin said, raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment from the public, please. Or unmute yourself and speak up, please.
And just a reminder for those coming by phone, it is *6 to unmute yourself and *6 again to remute yourself. I see a Woody's Clan 99. Could you identify yourself, please? I will unmute you. Hello?
Hi.
Hi, Woody's Clan 99?
Yes.
Who is that?
Christina Wood.
Okay.
Christina, I'm going to put you back on mute. I see Biagio has his hand up. Jeannie, would you like to recognize Mr. Del?
Yes, please.
Piano? Go ahead, Biagio.
Hi, my name is Biagio Del Villano. I live at 558 Glasgow Turnpike. And I have a couple questions. I'm wondering, has any other site been identified as a possible site for a cell tower? And if not, I'm wondering why, because every night when I drive home from work, there's a water tile exactly 1.5 miles from the Mount Marion fire station that is very tall, and it's right in the dead zone. It abuts the thruway and Old Kings Highway, and I'm wondering why nobody looked at that.
I'm going to ask if Mr. Crosby or Mr. Olson would like to answer this.
So you
Sure,
unmuted me
sorry.
already. I was looking for the button. Sorry, Scott, if you want to go ahead, go ahead.
Me too. No, Mike, you go ahead. You're the engineer.
So we've traditionally referred to that water tank as the Palace Candles water tank. That's a notorious location that's known to the wireless industry. It's a location that's been looked at, for as long as I've been in the business. Historically, there's been environmental issues with that property. That's why you'll notice that there's no wireless carriers on that tank. That's a tank that, like I can speak from personal experience, having worked for the other carriers. Everybody's tried to go on that tank historically in the past, and we've unsuccessfully been able to do that because of the environmental issues that impact that property and have historically impacted that property. At this point, that site at 1.5 miles north of our proposed location is too far away to achieve the objectives from what we're trying to do with this site, because this site is designed to work in conjunction with other sites. So that particular location falls in the middle of the areas between the two sites that we're working on right now. So that's where I'm at with that. Hopefully that helps.
My understanding is the EPA cleaned that site up. They determined that it's clean. I just got off their website yesterday, and it showed that. But you've done a study to assure that it's not going to work from that
Scott,
top?
you'd have to answer what our current status is. I'm only speaking from past experience, having looked at that tank in the past. It's been unavailable because of that. And as a federally licensed, wireless carrier, we have stringent requirements when it comes to environmental applications. So, Scott, if there's anything you can add to try to help answer that.
No, I think the only thing I would add is really to highlight the radio frequency issues. I mean, we've talked about it, Mike, in the past, and you've explained that that is not a viable alternative to this specific site. It's 1.5 miles away. It's extremely remote from our search area. So, Mike develops this area within which the site should be located. That's not even close. So even putting aside the environmental issues, it doesn't work from a radio frequency standpoint.
So to add to that, you've seen the application that we have where we have multiple frequencies that would be part of the new site, and specifically the higher capacity portion of our network, which is what we call the AWS band. That band is not capable of providing in-building coverage in that Mount Marion area from that Palace Candles water tank because of the distance.
So a path study was done.
We've looked at it, yes.
Biagio, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
This is Patty. Just to answer your question, that site has been remediated. It is no longer a contaminated site. That was one of the alternatives we used several years ago with Verizon. And also in terms of cell towers, in this case, no water would be used by a cell tower. So the water problems that had existed, which no longer exist, wouldn't have anything to do with siting of the cell tower. Just to clear it up and answer to your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Campanelli.
Hear me?
Yes, now that you've unmuted.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrew Campanelli. I'm an attorney. I represent 34 residents who would be adversely impacted by this proposed facility. I would imagine that you've had an opportunity to review a memorandum in opposition, which I've submitted along with some more supporting exhibits. I will not recover all of the items that I've addressed in the memorandum. I would ask to be placed into the record. However, I will touch on just a few finite issues. Among the considerations that this board should consider if it conducts a row balancing test are things which would include the impact upon legitimate local interests. And in this case, as laid out in the memorandum and supported by the supporting evidence which was submitted to the board, this proposed facility would have dramatic adverse impacts upon the nearby properties and the community in general, both in terms of significant adverse aesthetic impacts, and I've provided substantial evidence of same. Substantial evidence, the term referring to the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996, would also have dramatic adverse impacts on property values. I've submitted expert opinion letters, one of which indicates that at least with regard to one close home, it will reduce the value of the home by roughly 25%. On the other side of the equation, the board would also have to consider the benefit to be derived by the applicant and perhaps the public benefit that would be derived. Unfortunately, the applicant has not submitted sufficient hard probative data or evidence to enable the board to make an affirmative determination of the extent of the impact, positive impact or benefit to be derived by either the public or the applicant. The reason is the applicant hasn't provided any hard data to show not only if granting this application would be consistent with smart planning requirements, but if and to what extent it would actually benefit the applicant or the public. The reason is, without hard data, this board is incapable of ascertaining, to the extent that there are gaps in wireless service in this area, the possible extent to which this proposed facility would be the best means of remedying that gap. Because if it's not, if there is a gap in service, and I'm not arguing that service is perfect in the area, I think we all know it's not. But if this is not the best location for a tower, it's going to leave gaps if and when this tower is built, which necessarily means you're going to need another tower. And the evidence that is necessary to enable the board to make that determination can't be covered by someone telling you, well, we can't use the other water tower because it doesn't meet our coverage objectives. That is fluff. That is language that says we have to put it here and we can't put it there because you want to put it here. There is no hard data whatsoever. There are two types of deficiencies in wireless coverage that typically require the need for a new tower. The first of which is if they can identify a specific carrier that suffers from a significant gap in personal wireless services. The most accurate data to show exactly where a significant gap is a drive test. And that shows you specifically where the signal strengths are strong, where they are weak. That not only shows you the existence or absence of a gap, it shows you the location of the gap and the geographic limitations of the gap, where it is. And the same is said of deficiencies in capacity. It is very easy for Verizon to provide you with drop call records. They can hit a few keystrokes in the computer and print out a list. Not surprisingly, none of that data has been provided to you. In similar vein, there's no evidence that's been provided to you by this applicant to show you the actual adverse aesthetic impact that this proposed facility would inflict upon the nearby properties and thus adversely impact the interests of not only the nearby properties, but the community in general. Now, TARPON, they've been around for a long time. They know what they're supposed to show. Local federal courts have ruled that when an applicant submits a visual impact analysis, they're supposed to give you photographs taken from the perspective of the nearby homes. I don't see anything like that in this application. Now, to the extent that there is a claim that some public benefit would be derived through emergency communication systems, whether a fire department or police department, it's not unusual for applicants when they have particularly bad installations. Now, when I mean bad installations, they're poorly sited by virtue of the fact that they'll inflict substantial adverse impacts on the community. They try to pick soft targets. They'll go to a fire district. They'll approach a fire department or a police department and offer them nice little tidbits of goodwill. You know, we'll install antennas for your system on there. We'll pay for radios in your cars. And they try to circumvent the local zoning code because they believe that they won't get past the ZBA, the planning board, or even get site plan approval. So I can't overstate to the board the importance of taking a long, hard look, not only at the adverse impacts that this would inflict upon the nearby homes and the community where they want to put this roughly 12-story tower, but also take a hard look at the claims that the applicant says of the benefits that will be derived not only for the applicant, but for the community at large in terms of fire communication systems, police communication systems, whatever else they want to allege. This board is responsible for making factual determinations. That's part of the balancing test under Moreau. The problem is they haven't given you the evidence, the probative evidence you need to make those determinations. They certainly haven't given you the data to show that when you balance the interests of the benefit to be derived and of the applicant outweigh the adverse impacts on the community and the nearby properties, because unlike them, we gave you hard data. Now, in some of the communications I've seen from the applicant's attorney, I saw some rather curious issues. One of which includes a reference to a 2009 Centerville Fire Department and SBA Towers project. I'm not going to comment that other than to say that, as with any other zoning application, every single zoning application, including those involving a Monroe balancing test, every zoning application and project stands on its own. There's no such thing as a precedent, and there's no such thing as discrimination under the TCA, which would prohibit or interfere with your ability to make a determination that the Monroe balancing test can't be applied, and then proceed to determine if or not they should be granted variances and whatever other approvals they need under your code. I mean, after all, the whole purpose of the code, as it's set forth in its text, is to protect your citizens. And by doing so, it also means it's to protect the town. So the obligation is to do your job, which I admit is not easy. It's a difficult job. But I submit to you that whether or not there was another application at the Centerville Fire Department, it has no relevance here, none. And to the extent that anyone may claim that it would be discriminatory if you allow one fire department to have it, but not another one, that's absurd. It means nothing. Nor does the Monroe balancing test have anything to do with the Telecommunications Act of 1996. There was a reference to a failure to conduct the Monroe test would somehow violate the TCA. There's not one case anywhere in the United States in any way that holds that some failure to conduct the Monroe balancing test would somehow violate the TCA. So that basically means nothing. I'm going to look real quick because I don't want to take this too long. I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to comment. As I'm sure you know, your code is designed to do things like protect property values and avoid unnecessary adverse impacts. But key, in your code, it specifically says that one of the goals is to minimize the number of towers you need in the town. That is what's called a smart planning provision. That's one of the three principal goals for which local governments across the country adopt smart planning provision. Again, because of the lack of probative evidence that this applicant has supplied, it is impossible for you to ascertain if granting this approval would be consistent with smart planning provisions. There's no way you can figure out if this would be a superior location to the water tower you just discussed or any other location. Because without hard data for dropped calls or significant gaps, you have no way of knowing if granting this application will be consistent with smart planning and would be consistent with the requirements of either Monroe or your own zoning code. So I think because I've already given my brief, I'm not going to cover all those points again. I hope each of you will have an opportunity to review it. And I simply reserve the right to submit any submissions in writing within the 8-day period that you've left open after this evening. And I thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Comment, please. It's Ron.
Yes, Ron.
Hi. Just Attorney Campanelli has pointed out, the concept in long-term evolution, LTE, which is what the scheme is here, is not so much drop call, but primarily what Verizon has, I believe, and I said in my reports, has demonstrated that there are scheduler issues with the allocation of the packets in the LTE signal. And the drop call was something left over from CDMA. Yeah, it was easy to do and it made sense. In today in long-term evolution, the technology is so different that we look at other issues. And I do believe if you look at my first report, I did comment that I believe that the applicant had demonstrated that there was a capacity issue, and the capacity was based upon the fact that its narrow band frequencies, the narrow bandwidth frequencies, primarily the 700 megahertz that they might have, or the 850 that they're going to refarm, has not the capacity to handle what they expect and what they're achieving today because of the poor coverage of their long-term evolution frequency of the AWS band and the fact that they haven't allocated the 1900 band for this yet. So I was comfortable with that. The issue that I brought up as the town's consulting engineer is the fact that the alternate site analysis I thought was in question, being that the search ring was so small, so very small. I've never seen one that small, and the fact that it was centered on the location that they've chosen, which is also curious. But with respect to this water tank, for example, I think we went through that many years ago in your town. And I thought we had put to bed the issue of that, whether the issue of the EPA had been erased and that whatever that is, the federal government in a black zone or something had been determined. And I'd asked then, and I asked now, has a phase 1 environmental been done of that site? Number one. And number two, has the site been propagated to see if it meets the requirements of today? Because that site, when evaluated 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, or maybe longer, it's been a while, was that for the CDMA system? And we don't know what it is today. So to say, yes, it doesn't work, but there's no evidence to that. And finally, with respect to the gentleman who asked the question about this originally, the participant from the community, have other sites been looked at? It was my belief after our last video meeting, I believe it was my belief, I know it was my belief, but I'm not sure if the board believes it was that I had pointed out in my very first analysis that there appeared to be areas within a reasonable distance from the proposed location, i.e. what you may call the industrial zone, and those look like vacant properties. And my question was, would those serve, and being that they met your zoning requirements of height, that a taller facility at that location might work well? And Mr. Crosby did provide propagation maps, but they were based upon not what I believe were substantiated. He said, well, I looked at a Google map and I picked a location that I thought was right, but there was no actual determination of the height of the ground elevation by looking at a 7.5-minute topographic map or an exact location. And by the way, if a site was even available, because if no site was available, if no one either wanted to lease land or purchase land or sell land, then they were non-existent sites. To me, that is still open, and that's why I asked that question. I thought after our last one, we were going to have, was it the lady, the site acquisition lady from the site company?
Sarah.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Who was going to further look at that and say, yes, I want to approach these people, just like they did when they knocked on the door of the fire station, approach them and say, hey, we'd like to look at this as leasing space for a tower or purchasing land to do this. And would this be an available site? Once again, wasn't done. And my opinions have always been based upon that fact that, yeah, okay, there is coverage from here. And I've always said to you in the past, it does meet many of the objectives that Verizon Wireless wants. But is there a less, from your point of view as a land use board, a less intrusive method, as far as complying with your code, that might achieve the same results? And it's not my job to propagate sites. I can just look and say, does this site propagate with real sets of propagation? And by the way, Attorney Campanelli, I believe it is, did mention something, and I alluded to that last time, or in a report, that ultimately, if this becomes such a contentious issue, the only way to really demonstrate what is needed are to do scan tests of the system the way it exists today, both 850, 1800, and 2100, 23, whatever their AWS band is here, scan tests, and then to do CW, continuous wave drive tests, from a proposed site at various height. And whether it's 90 feet at the fire station or 120 feet at the fire station or 130 feet versus 90, 120, 140, some other location, to see which one would best meet the needs of the carrier. Granted, it's costly. It goes beyond what someone might say would be required, but nearly the gold standard in demonstrating the need for a site. They have demonstrated, in my professional opinion, they have an issue with capacity. There is no doubt about it, because They haven't refarmed their lower frequency bands yet to handle the new LTE. They're still playing CDMA, and they're just getting into it now. Once that happens, though, that's also going to change the equation, and things will get better. But that's not today, and we're worried about today right now. And that's what your board is faced with. And those are my comments. Has the water tank actually been propagated? Has a phase 1 environmental been done on it now? And what about another real site in the industrial zone? Has something been identified? Has the site acquisition person actually said, no, there's nothing available there? If that's the case, then you know what? We go back to ground zero and begin where we are now. Thank you very much for your time. I will mute the button.
Thank you, Ron. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak?
Jeannie, if I may, I'm going to unmute the phone. I'm going to unmute the phone callers just in case they're unsure of how to unmute themselves.
Thank you.
I would invite anybody who's in on the phone to speak up now. Otherwise, I'll be remuting you in the future.
Is that Joe trying to talk? Joe?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Were you try? I heard someone trying to speak. Was that you?
I just agree with what Ron said.
Is that Gina and Doug? Are you trying to speak?
No, thank you.
Anyone else from the phone callers?
Going once? Okay. I apologize that we have to do this remotely. We would all much rather, for many reasons, be in person and speaking to each other and seeing each other. But at this point, that is not possible. So, if there's no one else from the public, I would ask that anyone from Verizon would like to speak. Mr. Olson, Mr. Crosby,
Sure. Thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to address a couple of the issues that Ron had made. One question was there a phase 1 done in the water tank? No, there wasn't. A couple of reasons. It's not a viable alternative for us for this particular site. And we can't just do a phase 1 on property that we have no legal interest in. So since we never pursued it and we're not pursuing it because our engineer said it will not do anything for this particular area, we never pursued a lease with or for that property. So I just want to make sure that for those that aren't familiar, you can't just go do a phase 1 on anyone's property when you want to. You have to have permission. And since we didn't feel it was a viable alternative, we didn't do it, obviously. In terms of the last meeting and identifying industrial zoning district locations, I wrote to the board in August and then September, and what our goal was, given that your law requires you to do the balancing test, we had basically said we're going to kind of hold off on any further application materials because we think that the board should do the balancing test first. I mean, it's under section 245-38. We didn't come to the board, just to clarify, we didn't come to the board seeking that because there's some perceived weakness in the application. In fact, the board actually, if you recall, asked us to provide a statement on that issue. So because, we realize that, and I thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for the clarification, and I did speak to Mr. Lyons today, that the board plans on, barring any unforeseen circumstances, closing the public hearing portion that relates to the Monroe test today. So that's consistent with what we're trying to do. Let's get through that. Let's have the board get through that process. And then depending on what your determination ultimately is on that issue, we either go forward with the application or we don't. So we weren't, Ron, trying to, not provide the information right now. We just thought it's really time, just let's get that part done. And I think the board agrees with us that that Monroe test is something that should be done first.
Scott, can I ask a question? This is Patty.
Please do, Patty.
Alternatives is one of the balancing questions in the Monroe. And we have spoken to you and to Mike and to Sarah over many months now about that. So if that was the case that you were going to be making, it's an, considering that we hope to close this section, it's an odd time to hear about your feelings about that. We have been asking from the beginning, the very first meeting, which you were not there, and that was the June meeting, about considering the industrial and light industrial zone as alternatives. And we really got a lot of pushback. And so I just wanted to just balance your statement that, we'll get to it later.
Well, I understand I can see where you're saying that, but we did provide information. I mean, we provided propagation, very detailed propagation data, and Ron has seen that, and there's a difference of opinion. Ron doesn't, necessarily agree with Mr. Crosby, but we did provide more detailed data than I've seen almost ever in an application on that specific issue. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That was very, very detailed, kind of down to street level information. But so, if Ron is saying, well, you didn't tell us if you've spoken to property owners about whether it's available or not, we haven't done that because we feel that we've provided data that shows that, I can't tell you that Verizon would build it in the industrial zone. I'm not saying they wouldn't or wouldn't. They could walk away and say, we told you, this is not good for us. I don't know what they would do. But we did give data on that. We didn't just ignore it. I apologize if I led you to believe that we just ignored it. We didn't.
Short shrift is the word I would use.
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree.
I understand.
I agree with Patty. Sorry.
Well, I would just refer to the data.
We've been trying to do that, Mr. Olson. We have been trying to refer to the data. We have not been given the data that we have requested.
I do respectfully disagree, and I think Ron has a letter. And again, I'm not saying Ron agrees 100% with Mike, but Ron reviewed that data to which I am referring, and I have a letter saying that he referred that data. So I think there might be, I hear what you're saying, and if you have additional data that you want, please let me know. But we've given some pretty specific data on that issue.
I think I agreed to the fact that the demonstration of need capacity-wise was well demonstrated. I was very pleased with that because in the areas of your existing coverage, you were capacity starved. Other interest also that Mr. Crosby did a wonderful job demonstrating as they usually do. The issue of coverage was, I think, less defined, and as I pointed out to you also, the Verizon says we need this particular signal strength to have reliable service, and they use a number, and whether it's minus 95 or minus 105 dBm RSRP, that's what they use, and that's where the coverage maps stop. And I always ask the question, well, let's bring back significant figures here. Let's just look at the accuracy of any of this calculated data, which according to the standard setting organizations could be maybe 8 to 10 dB differential. So if you're saying you draw the line in the sand at minus 95 dBm, well, fine. Well, what if it's at, and remember, these are negative numbers. What if it's at minus 96 dBm, which is a smaller signal strength, by the way, or minus 97? Are you telling me it wouldn't work? There's the issue here where ultimately the drive testings get a little more meaningful because of the accuracy involved. I just hate when lines are drawn in the sand by individuals who draw those lines, because it's my personal belief that any of this stuff is subject to the vagaries of a calculation, of a simulation, of something demonstrating what might be as opposed to something what is. And this only really comes into play in all of the applications I've reviewed. And believe me, I've done an awful lot in my short career doing this, 30 years. That when it's like this, and when there is concern by a board, then you go to the next phase. And that phase would be the further demonstration of it. And Scott, I know that by the way, listen, a reasonable presentation was made with respect to the alternate site, but it didn't meet, I believe, the standard in relation to the way your other sites were done. Mike said, okay, here's where I think that this is a location that I saw on Google Earth, and this looks like just about in the spot. Now, in a deal like that, you need property lines, you need actual elevations of the ground elevation, and then also being that it's an area that, by the way, I think you can go greater than 90 feet there. I'm not the zoning expert here, but if that's the case, then, and I imagine that the applicant, whether it's Verizon or Tarpon Towers, looks at a taller facility and saying, my gosh, I'm going to have more rentable aperture. Why not do that? It only makes sense to me. And then if it helps the board in their decisions, then, or if it closes it and says, this is a done deal, this is it, take it or leave it, this is the way the site works, then it's done. It's a matter of evidence. And I really thought after the last meeting, you guys are going to come back and say, we propped this, we found it, here's what it is. And that may have helped. So I just point that out now. Not that your data is incorrect, not that it's not valuable for this. It's just that where you are now, and we're saying this balancing test, which is beyond my pay grade, got to look at these issues. And it would be helpful to me as the independent guy here. I really don't care. Other people may care. I don't care. I don't live there, and I'm not getting paid to say this is a bad deal. I don't care. I just want you to have all the information that you need to make a decision. Okay, and I'll be quiet from now on. Good night.
And Ron, thank you. And my point was not to argue with you about the details of the conclusions, but like you said that we made a reasonable presentation of the alternative site information for what you saw. That was my point, is that it was submitted, but I know that the chairwoman and Patty, you were saying that wasn't submitted. I was just trying to make sure that we're on the same page. There was certain information submitted. That was it. So, and in terms of, the negative 96, negative 95,
97.
I leave that to the engineers, except to say, I mean, there's a certain industry standard that's been accepted by the industry and the courts, and you just got, there are certain reasonable, what do you call it, decibel levels for each specific technology. So you could be running around in circles at, well, is it 97? Is it 96? Is it 92? Is what? We've just complied with what the courts have said is a reasonable industry accepted standard. So the courts have accepted it. So that's why we try to just be consistent instead of jumping around, because if we jumped around to different levels, we might be accused of, well, now you're just manipulating data. And believe me, I've heard that before. So we try to be consistent.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that a little bit too, Scott. Just expand on that. The neg 95 is derived from knowing that there are variations and fluctuations in RF signal. That's how those numbers are derived. So to suggest that, we wouldn't have usable signal at neg 96 versus neg 95, nobody's saying that. But from a presentation and network analysis standpoint, based on the precedence that exists out there and based on the network performance, we know that neg 95 is that number to use, knowing that there's going to be some fluctuation, both positive and negative from that number. So that's where those numbers come from. So there is no suggestion that that's the only level that works for a given frequency at a given location. But more importantly, the notion that somehow drive test data is going to solve these questions is quite ludicrous to me, because 20 years ago, we used to use drive test data. 25 years ago, 26 years ago, we used drive test data. Because at the time, all we cared about were the roads. That's what the network was. It was a mobile network designed to cover mobile in-car use. But fast forward to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that's changed. And as you know, the people have cut the cord and they're using their phones in their homes. They're not just in their cars anymore, in their businesses, for their work. So suggesting that, somehow drive testing roads is going to answer all the questions, it doesn't. It only would potentially answer some questions related to what's happening on this particular data set, which would be the roads. That's only a portion of what it is that we're trying to achieve here. We're very, very concerned about the coverage in many other places. So I don't think that the notion of drive test data is the direction we need to go in. I know you've all used your phones. I know you've been in the same place one day versus the next day, and you got 1 bar one day, 5 bars the next day, and you say, what's going on? Well, RF signal fluctuates. It fades. What that means is you're stationary, that signal is going to fade. So your signal is going to get stronger. It's going to get weaker. It's going to get stronger. It's going to get weaker. And so as you drive through an area, depending upon the speed, what type of device, what the weather conditions are, you're going to get different drive test data each time you drive that. So to suggest that drive test data is somehow more consistent or accurate than the propagation data, that's just absolutely not true. That's not the case. Fast forward from the 90s, to current, and the propagation tools that we have are amazingly accurate. We're at 95+% accuracy with the ATOL tool. So we have a good confidence level that the data that we're providing you is the best way to convey. And quite frankly, people like to see pictures. They like to see a picture of what does it look like today? What is it you're trying to fix? These pictures are the best way to convey that information. And we've consistently done that across upstate New York, consistently done that across the Hudson Valley. So I think we're doing a good job at conveying that information. Traditionally, this is a very solid way to present the information. We present it because not only is it what we depend on, it's the most accurate way to depict it, and it's what is most often the best received by the communities and the municipalities. So we're very confident what we're doing is in fact the right way to do this. And by the way, I don't necessarily disagree with Ron when he talks about me picking a location. The last thing I want to do is pick a location from Google Earth and suggest that somehow that's the place that we need to be. That's not how we run the business, and that's why I've really objected throughout this process to analyzing hypothetical locations. We discussed the alternatives, we discussed the approximate locations, and we discussed using an apples to apples comparison to compare what we've proposed versus what the alternatives that were suggested. So as far as I'm concerned, I've done what I've been asked to do as far as looking at these different locations. I realize that, people may not be happy with the results, but the fact is in an apples to apples comparison, what we propose is, there's no question that it's better, and we provided that information. Thank you very much.
Mike?
Yes.
Henry?
Mike, Henry Rua. If I'm understanding you correctly, you would not be able to reach your 95 preferred at Industrial Drive?
So you're asking, would we be able to provide the same signal strength in the target coverage objective locations from Industrial Drive versus what we've proposed? And the answer is we looked at an apples to apples comparison. So we used the exact same installation that we've proposed, and we've put that at the other Latin longs that we discussed. The answer is that the signal strength is weaker at that from the industrial zone property to the point where our AWS signal is not usable. Our AWS signal, as a reminder, is our high value, high capacity layer that we need to fix these capacity issues. So it would be unwise if we were to use one of those alternate locations in the same form as what we've proposed at the fire department.
Okay. And what if you were able to go higher in elevation at Industrial Drive than at the firehouse?
Well, that's a different question, and that was discussed when we decided how we wanted to address those questions. And at this point, we've only provided an answer as far as an apples to apples comparison is concerned. So I appreciate and I completely understand what you're asking. So don't think that I don't understand what you're asking. But we're talking about hypothetical alternate locations, and I agree with Ron. If we're going to look at an alternate location, we have to have a real location and talk about real heights, and so that we can decide, what height is needed. This is not. It's not wise to go down that path without having real alternate locations. We've looked at hypothetical locations, and when you do that, you do an apples to apples comparison, and that's what we've done so far.
Okay, Mike, I gotta ask you a question.
And then I will.
Before you signed a lease, before Verizon signed a lease with the firehouse, you picked that thing because there was a tower. You didn't know exactly what you were going to get with that. You picked it because it fit your criteria.
Our search ring was originally centered on the intersection of Glasgow Turnpike and I-87.
Right.
And we did have the existing tower inside that search ring.
And that's why, and we understand that's why it was picked.
And our intent,
but for you to say that you need to have a signed buyer before you can go in and propagate a particular property, there are 7 different properties at least over an industrial drive. Pick one.
we're coming up with a conceptual.
Pick one of the vacant ones that you think is closest to where you need to be, and pick a tower of your height. Go up to 160 top, whatever you need, and see whether or not it fits your criteria. I mean, you're saying that you don't have a willing buyer. Well, you say that, you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to, we'll just be spinning our wheels from now until forever.
Can I just jump in? Part of the reason, and I think we've explained it, part of the reason we picked the site is based upon actually the town's zoning law. I know it's a zoning district, but there is a hierarchy that we have to comply with. And when the RF engineer identifies the area within which we need to locate a new facility, we applied your zoning law. And so we didn't make that up, and we all know the type 1 through 5 facilities. That was a big factor in picking the fire department. In addition to the fact that clearly the fire department is going to benefit. There are public benefits to the fire department. Okay. And the fact that, not only the fire department, I mean, I know I heard someone claim that there might be an alleged public service benefit. I mean, the chief of police wrote to you explaining that there would be a big benefit to them. We met with them back in, I think it was December of 2019, maybe of January. I don't remember exactly, but I remember speaking to the officer. He was adamant. The radio communications and the service in this area is horrible. And they felt this would help them so much to be able to respond to public emergencies. So,
absolutely.
Okay.
And Tarpon Towers said, no matter where the tower goes, those services will be available regardless of the tower.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Okay, well, that
Okay, I will take over for Patty then.
Okay.
Because I think we're in the same wavelength. We understand and we have heard from the fire department and the police department the benefits. I don't believe anyone on the zoning board is disputing the fact that there is a need for increased coverage there. They have lousy reception. On the other hand, when you talk about our zoning law, you have to read and quote the zoning law completely, which means that a type 4 is okay if there's another tower there that has been permitted under that act. I would like someone, please, to show me any permit for the fire tower at the firehouse now. There isn't one.
Because they're exempt. Because they were exempt under the old.
Because they're pre-existing. Correct.
Or because
they do not meet it. They do not meet the zoning thing.
And I appreciate what you're hearing.
Furthermore, we are comparing apples here. But we are comparing crab apples and delicious apples. They're not the same. We have asked repeatedly, and I know you're all tired of hearing us ask this, but we will continue to say that we want you to explore the availability of those vacant parcels that Patty mentioned on Industrial Drive that are allowed to have type 4, type 5 towers, which could be higher and could possibly meet your needs better.
And Scott, can you hear me, Jeannie?
Good. Yes.
Jeannie? Okay. Scott, the properties over in Industrial Drive are at minimum 5+ acres each. Some have buildings on them, at least 2 have nothing on them, but even those that have buildings on them have room to put a tower if you wanted to go over and negotiate with them. So it's not like you don't have choices. And the point I wanted to make before is the Tarpon Towers people. He was here, he's here again tonight. He made it very clear to all of us that regardless of where the tower goes, the emergency services will have their equipment on the tower. So you can't keep referring to the fact that only if it's at the firehouse. That's not the case.
I never said that. I never said only if it's at the, I said that at the firehouse, it does have certain benefits. I never said only. And Brett did say that it's their policy to do something. He doesn't have to, depending on what the costs involved were. And I haven't spoken to him, so he may want to hit
I'm
me on a
just taking
2x4.
what he said to us. I was very specific with him.
But you can't hold him to that is what I'm saying. Like if he was forced to go over there, he doesn't have to give that to them. That's all I'm trying to say.
Brett, are you still on the line? Is Brett from Tarpon Tower still on the line?
I think he is. I see his number there.
Yes.
Let me unmute him if he can't do himself. I think Brett is ending in 02.
Oh, okay. Hello.
Brett, hi. This is Patty Kelly. I asked you a question last month.
Patty, I think we answered the question in our letter to the board stating how we handle emergency services requests.
Yes, but Scott is raising an issue.
Yeah, and also I gave testimony to that effect last meeting.
Yes.
You did.
Which I think is, I don't know how to access that audio, but
you're absolutely right. But Scott is making it seem as if that is not really always the case, that you could change your mind if it was too expensive. What is he talking about? Well, either you offer it to emergency services or you don't.
All I said was you can't hold him to it.
Well, he said he would do it.
But it's not a binding contract. It sounds like he's saying, I'm just saying, let's make it clear. I don't know. He could change his mind. I'm not saying he will, but.
Well, then why raise it? Why raise it? He just reiterated it's his corporate policy. So let's just move on.
You got it.
Good. Anyone else like to speak?
I have a question for Sarah. Sarah, are you still there?
I am here.
Okay. I just want to follow up on the material you sent us since last meeting. You sent us about the 4 additional properties that were not considered and not explored because they would have been type 5. I'm looking at the map. I read the properties. I've actually gone over to see some of them. Did anybody ever go put eyes on those properties from either your office or from Verizon? Did anybody ever go take a look at those properties? Or are they just dots on a computer screen?
No, somebody did drive by and put eyes on them. It was not personally me.
Who did that? Do you know?
It's someone from Aerosmith Development.
Okay. So for example, letter G is a cornfield. It's being used as an agriculture. It's a cornfield. I don't know if that would make a difference to you, but it's very close to the thruway and they're growing corn there. A lot of corn.
Right.
Letter D. You have it back there. I'm not sure from where you have the letter. It crosses a line. I don't know how far back that property goes, but it's 11.75 acres or something like that. Has anybody been onto that property? Because you can't see it from Glasgow Turnpike. So I was just wondering if anybody's been there to see that property, which is very close to the thruway.
I don't think anyone has literally stepped a foot on the property. Again, these properties were not within the hierarchy. Again, going 1 through 5, it just seemed like the fire department had the tower. Verizon originally was going to try and make that tower work.
Right.
You know,
But we-
just kind
but
of
we know
remember
that
that
that's not
too.
happening.
So it evolved that way. Yes.
I just wanted to point out to you that that property D is very, very close to the light industrial zone that we're all talking about. So, and in terms of the others, the E, is that I mean, I'm trying to figure out how far down that property goes to where the tower, the power things are right there. There's a whole slew of power lines along those properties. Did anybody see whether or not a tower did you ever investigate whether a tower could go where those power lines are?
No, that's not really.
I know that you were considering it only type 5. You were considering it as being type 5s and therefore being not considered.
Nope. Even besides that, it's not typical that the power companies will allow a utility company to come into the middle of their right of ways. They don't like that. That is something that is not really welcomed.
Okay. And then the other question that I had asked you last time that you were going to get back to me is when you did this, when you prepared this information for Verizon, you said it was 2018. I was wondering if you knew when you were going to check your computer.
All right. I can do that right now. I can get back to you.
Okay, thanks. And Scott, I just have a question for you, if I may.
Please.
I wanted to ask the distance measurements that you've been using for your variances for how far it is to the front, the side, and the back. Who did those measurements?
I need to check the plans. I'm not sure if that was Tectonic. Here they are. Sorry.
It's okay.
That's wrong. That's the wrong one. I believe that it was Tectonic Engineering, but I don't have a large set of plans in front of me right now.
Do you know if they did it via computer or whether they did it in person on the ground?
Let's see. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I know they were out there doing some work and they staked some things, but I believe that it was done before that.
They were done way before that. So that's why I'm wondering if it was.
Yeah. Chances are it was done by computer when they got the property line information in there. And since the plans are scaled, they were able to do it that way.
Okay.
So perhaps using the survey, they figured it from that?
I believe so. They had the survey. So I'd have to ask Steve at Tectonic how he incorporated the survey. I don't know the specifics of it, but I'll ask him.
Okay, and then there was just one other question I asked you last time, and you were going to try and get back to me. And I wanted to know how many towers, Verizon towers, there are in the town of Ulster and in the city of Kingston.
Yeah, I have no idea how many towers there are. I'm not saying you didn't ask. Off the top of my head, I don't recall it, but it's been a while. But I don't know how many towers in Kingston.
In the city of Kingston.
In the city of Kingston, we can get that. I know of 1 or 2 that I've done some work on.
We'd like to know because we are getting an awful lot of towers in Saugerties, and we're not a metropolis, and so we'd like to kind of get a sense of where we are and compared to others. Now, I know you did a tower, or you were going to do a tower at the Ulster rest stop, but I don't see a tower there. Was some other mechanism used to do?
I believe, Mike, that was a small cell, correct?
Yeah, it's actually a small cell. So it's a wooden
cell?
It's a wooden telephone pole. It's about 50, 55 feet tall. It's
Right, but
actually
why would you
located
do
on,
that? Why would you use a small cell? If there was a need for it, why wouldn't you have put up a tower?
well, originally we wanted to do a site right at the Ulster Travel Plaza.
Right.
But the New York State right-of-way challenges that prevented us from doing that. And so because of that, we had to look at an alternate. So we looked at the ridge line that was behind to the west of the travel plaza, and you'll note that there's a water tank that's up on top of that hill. So we were looking at co-locating the antennas on that water tank. And what we found was instead of locating on the water tank, because that ridge line offers approximately 100 feet of additional ground elevation relative to the coverage area along I-87, in the housing community that's in that area and the rest area, we were able to build ours is about like 50, 55 feet, which is relatively small, but using that ground elevation, its strategic location allowed us the effective height for the antennas of about 150 feet compared to the area that we're serving. And so that's why terrain is extremely important in this area.
Macro site then? Was it more like a macro?
It's a two-sector small cell, and we were able to meet this was done with the town of Ulster. So it was a municipal installation for a small cell on their property.
And were you able to
So the
offload
ground-
any of your capacity from from the tower in the town of Kingston, the one that we're?
It's part of a multi-site solution to do so. So that is designed to work directly in conjunction with the Glasgow Turnpike I-87 site. So those two solutions working together are going to solve that capacity issue, yes.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm confused that because of the ground elevation, effectively 120 or 30 foot, you said?
Well, 100 foot of ground elevation advantage from the travel plaza up to the ridge line, and then an additional 50 feet with the pole. So you're about 150 feet above the target area. So using
It almost looked like a
two antennas. I'm sorry, Ron.
It almost looked like a macro site then?
Well, I mean, from a technical standpoint, it meets the criteria of small cell. We're able to place the remote radio head equipment on the pole. The antennas are less than 3 cubic feet per antenna. You know, so we do meet those requirements, but from a coverage standpoint, yes, it's more like a macro. But it's only two sectors and it's only one antenna per sector. So it's something that's common throughout the Hudson Valley. That's what a lot of the small cells look like, because small cells just simply don't have the horsepower to get the job done in this area. The gaps are just way too big. But wherever we can, try to tread lightly and minimize the impact to the community. We do that everywhere we can. And this is an example of us doing that.
I mean, I ask that because I know I've reviewed a number of small cells that you've done on lampposts, in parking lots, in other locations up in the Hudson Valley, but that with the unusual ground elevation, it makes it look like a big site, and that's fine. I would hardly, I mean, be honest with you, I wouldn't call it a small cell, because a small cell would be right in the average terrain surrounding it, and it would be something to provide auxiliary. But one other thing. Who was the power provider in the area?
For the Ulster, for this.
Is it NYSEG or
Central Hudson?
Central Hudson.
Okay. I don't recall, so.
Okay.
Central Hudson.
Okay, I do believe, and maybe Scott will remember, I think in my reviews, we've done a number of so I'm not certain about this issue they don't like. Power companies will take colos on existing transmission lines. In fact, we talked about that one down here years ago, and that's when there was another Bill was the RF engineer at the time, and we investigated those, and they were possibilities. And you know what? When I looked at this, I didn't spend a lot of time looking at your alternatives. I just looked at the site you chose and something in the immediate vicinity. I didn't believe it was my job to view all of the 5 sites that may not have met the requirements. So, I mean, that dismissing it that way, I don't know if it works or not, but power companies do take colos. Con Ed, Central Hudson, New York State Electric and Gas, Orange and Rockland, they all take colos on power lines. I mean, they're difficult, no doubt about it. They are difficult because you have to go up in the aperture of 36 kV lines, and it's not the ideal thing. But once again, it's just a question to ask, and that's why I stay in my concept of near the actual search ring. Was there something near there? And that's what we'll, by the way, I've been working for 10 years now on a case in Georgia that came back from the Supreme Court. believe it or not, and it was with the uncarrier. And in that case, we began using or had to utilize drive tests and calculated at bins of signal strength, you know, minus 95, minus 96, minus 97, because no one could dispute the fact, notwithstanding your design requirements, which I'm not questioning because it gives you headroom, which is good. It gives you reliability. That's why you're the best network because of that, no doubt about it. But once again, weighing the needs of the community, when you do that, and by the way, that case is still ongoing after 10 years because of all this on and on and on. It's incredible. There are alternatives, and they don't want to do the alternative. The town doesn't. I mean, it gets crazy after a while. I would hope that, and I was hoping that I really was, that you would just come back and say, yeah, our site act people, they found something here. We evaluated, we determined the ground elevation by GPS at the site, and we proposed this high a pole, and then here's the coverage. And we proposed this high a pole, and here's the coverage. Now you clearly have something. Granted, it's expensive, but I'm just trying to be the, as I said, the unbiased in this, is that the board needs answers, and if you could do that, it would be great. I mean, it would make your job and my job a lot easier in this, and we don't disagree, I don't think. We realize that there's shortages in both sides of this allocation. You've made a very good demonstration, but now the board is asking questions. So that is one question. When I hear that power companies don't like that, yeah, I get a little nervous about that, okay?
Well,
Thanks.
Well,
what happens
this is
with power?
Kathy Pomponio. Can I just jump in here a second? Ron, you and I, we worked together a long time ago. Not
When
so
I
much
owned the
recent.
tower that you were on, right? I
What's
remember
that?
you.
Oh, yeah, I think you do.
Yeah, not anymore. Not anymore. It's histoire, as they say.
I just want to jump in and say that co-location on high voltage power lines really is not desirable from either side any longer. I know it was done in the past. We are seeing more and more that they do not want to allow us on the high voltage structures, nor does it help our network to be on them, because they take, you know, we have a problem with an antenna. Our network is in jeopardy for a year until they take that line out of service and their customers are without power. We have to wait, and it jeopardizes our network, and we just can't have that. And the power companies are saying no these days. I've seen it time and time again. So that Sarah was correct when she said that. I know we've done it in the past, but it's not done so much anymore. And even putting structures next to those high voltage power lines, you have to have huge clearances per their regulations in order to get that done. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Thanks for my point of view. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, at this point, I would like to ask if anyone else on the zoning board has any questions or comments, please. And hearing nothing, I will turn it over to the ZBA's attorneys. If you have any comments or questions you would like to ask, please.
Thank you, Jeannie. I don't have any questions or comments at this time. I don't know whether Kim has any.
I do not, thank you.
Okay, George? Are you still here, George? I guess not, or he has nothing to say. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? This is a public hearing.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
I'm here. I have no comment.
Hello?
Yes, George Redder. I have no comment.
Thank you, George.
Okay. Forgot to hit the star 6.
Hi.
No, there's
This
someone
is
else.
Tamara. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Tamara.
Thank you. I have a question. This is for any of the engineers and any of the attorneys present. Can anybody do a drive test? For instance, someone who's not an engineer like myself perform a drive test in the so-called areas where there are gaps? And how would I do this test? And would this be considered evidence for the hearing?
It's Ron. I'm aware of many individuals in hearings like this. It's called crowdsourcing. And they utilize their cell phone and they drive around and they work with a crowdsourcing company. And there are a number of them out there and they report their results. And those, in fact, you can go online, and I'm not going to mention any particular company that does this because I don't want to have, but you can certainly research those. I don't want to be a proponent of any of these. But then you go online and you can see what the capacity is in an area, what the coverage is in the area, and where the gaps are. And it's called crowdsourcing. Now, many courts have kind of said, that from my experience, they said, yeah, okay, that's very nice. But you know what? It wasn't really the kind of gold standard data we're looking for. But it certainly is helpful to see that the people are able to use their phones, because to me, when we talked about the gold standard in drive tests, actually the gold standard, as far as I'm concerned, when you make the call, does the phone work? And can you carry the call through? There is the gold standard, because if it works for Joe Blow in a car or on the street or in this house and it works, you know, that's the coverage, notwithstanding. And Bill was right on that, the concept has changed. It's not just roads anymore, it's everything. But indeed, you could do that with a crowdsourcing app. It's easy to do. You load it to your phone and it just takes the data, presents it on a coverage map. How much it's accepted, I don't know for sure. It depends on the board or the municipality or ultimately the court.
Yeah, this is Scott Olson. Generally, Ron, it's not accepted by the courts. You know, we've seen a few people challenge it that way, and I'm not aware of any court accepting that data as evidence ever. You know, and in terms of that, I think we design the networks a little differently. You know, I don't design them, I'm not the engineer, but I know Verizon Wireless's attitude is, well, just if Joe Blow picks up the phone and it works, you know, that doesn't mean it's good service, because it's not just one person, as you know, it's a number of people. And what happens if you have an emergency? Again, if you don't have a robust network in an emergency situation, you know, and only 30% of the people can use their phones, that's not a good situation. So and Mike could speak to it more if he wants to, there are very specific design requirements for, you know, redundant networks. It's not really just for one person to pick up a phone and say, hey, I got a signal, this works, this is great. We go a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I can add that, you know, certainly, you know, I think it's worthwhile for anybody that's interested to, you know, explore the area and try to understand some of the challenges that exist. But just keep in mind that the coverage is only part of the story, the capacity issues that exist. You know, and if you're able to make calls on our 700 megahertz, that doesn't mean you're able to make calls on our 2100 megahertz network, which is critical for this area. So we operate in multiple license bands of spectrum, and we require the service from all of those bands of service in this area. So while you may be able to make a call and think that, you know, hey, I think things are okay here, maybe it's not as bad as we thought. What you would be missing is that portion of the network is severely overloaded because of the inability of the higher frequencies that are critical to improving the capacity conditions. Because those can't cover that area, you would be missing that. Another component would be that, you know, when we test a network, we utilize calibrated test equipment. So customer gear certainly, you know, can provide some information for, you know, anybody out there. It really isn't, you know, standardized feedback or standardized data. I think it's worthwhile though if somebody wants to go out there, because there's a lot of places you definitely can't make a call. You know, but again, like I say, just because you can make a call doesn't indicate that we don't have gaps in service and the other frequencies that we operate, which we've detailed in the RF justification report, that are needed to solve the overloading of those lower frequency bands that cover from the far distant sites. Hopefully that helps.
Mike, I just find it curious that when a carrier, and I'm not saying Verizon, carrier talks in commercials about the best coverage or the best capacity or the best whatever it is, then they show something. And then if you read the very fine print, it's based upon crowdsourced information from people that they've utilized. It's not based on theirs. And if you look at their coverage maps, it's also somewhat based upon calculated and their crowdsourced information when they say the very best coverage. And then you look down at the bottom and you read who the crowdsourcer was, and that's how they demonstrated. But I agree with you, though, that the way you measure signal strengths, the way you do drive testing, is nearly the gold standard. You have calibrated antennas, calibrated receivers, scanning that are taking hundreds of data points per second as you drive this. No, that is the way to do it, and there's no doubt about it. And that's why it's nearly the gold standard. I would say nearly because I'm not really sure what the ultimate gold standard would be. But no, you guys do a good job. There's no doubt about it. And that would be the kind of evidence that it's expensive, but then would end any uncertainty besides a viable, calculated, alternate site analysis. And man, if we could just get that, it would be terrific.
Thank you, Ron. I think that's what the zoning board has been asking for 4 or 5 months, an alternate site analysis. And perhaps not with your fancy numbers, Mike, which frankly I don't understand. I'm glad Ron does. But in terms of a community is a whole situation. It is not just the fire department. It's not 1 or 2 houses. It is everyone who lives around. And that's what we're trying to determine what is the best for coverage. And I don't believe anyone on the zoning board or anyone would dispute that there is coverage necessary. Capacity, yes. But first of all, the elementary school certainly deserves to have cell service, as do the other neighbors. But our point and our job as zoning board members is to try to find the best place for everyone. And that is exceedingly difficult at this point. And part of it is because we have asked repeatedly, and I will ask one last time, that we really would appreciate some investigation of available sites on Industrial Drive, which is within the industrial zone. Yes, it would have to be a type 5 tower, which is what it is going to have to be at the firehouse now. But it also could be higher. And you would not have to come back to the zoning board. You could go to the planning board for site approval, and that would be it.
Okay, Scott, did that perk up your ears a little bit?
Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. Sorry. Too many things on this screen. No, we hear what you're saying. And again, all we wanted to do we all know why we are where we are.
Right.
Yes, we do.
We just, we thought that it would be helpful for the fire department based on a whole bunch of factors. So, but that being said, is it still the goal of the Zoning Board of Appeals to consider closing that portion of the public hearing for the Monroe test tonight?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I am not closing it yet because I would like to give everyone one last chance to speak. I hear a great deal of silence.
Let's move on then.
Patty, this is Sarah. I just
Hi,
wanted
Sarah.
to let you know that the original search ring was issued in March, April of 2017.
2017. Okay, thank you very
Correct.
much. Appreciate it.
Shortly after the Schoolhouse Road Churchland decision, which is in 2016, I believe, Mr. Olson. And that need has been there since then.
Yes, it has.
Okay. At this point, I have several motions to make. I would like a second from the ZBA members only, please. First of all, the secret designation of negative declaration is rescinded, having been issued prematurely. This is due to new information received during the public hearing and is rescinded upon advice of legal counsel. A new vote will be taken at the November 2nd meeting. Do I have a second?
A second.
Patty. Okay, we're going to do a roll call. I hope I can see everyone. Holly?
Hang on, I'm muted.
No, you're not.
Okay, I thought I was. I was looking for the button.
Was that an aye or a nay?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Patty?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Joe Mayone? Oh, Joe. Joe was here on the telephone. He may be muted.
*6 to unmute yourself, Joe. I'm not sure which phone number you're on.
Try the 1 and 3-8.
I hit a *6. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
So I vote yes.
You vote yes, and I vote yes. Okay, so it is 5-0. My next motion is to close that portion of the public hearing that pertains, to the matter of the immunity of the project from the town of Saugerties zoning law.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tim. Second. Patty?
Yes.
Holly? You can raise your hand. Yes. Joe?
Yes.
Good. And I vote yes. Okay, two more. And this is important to the public. To extend the time to submit written comment on the issue of immunity of this project from the town zoning law until Tuesday, October 13th at 4 o'clock. So please feel free to submit any kind of written information. Very strange, I'm hearing voices. And I would ask you to refer to the town website for the agenda for this evening, in which the 9 elements of the Monroe is listed. That will tell you what are things we have to take into consideration to decide upon immunity. Okay, yes?
Joe, I'll second it.
Okay. Patty?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Holly? Yes. I saw the hand. And I vote,
Yes.
okay. Okay. The last one, to continue that portion of the public hearing that pertains to the area and use variances to our meeting scheduled for Monday, November 2nd. And for that meeting, particularly for attorneys, etc., the last day for submissions by the applicant is 4 p.m. on Wednesday, October 2/1. That's for the applicants. It's the last time we will accept submissions. A second?
I'll second.
Second by Patty. Tim?
Yes.
Holly?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Joe said yes, and I vote yes. It is passed. I know you're tired of hearing this, but I'm going to say it again. Before we adjourn, I'd like to suggest to the applicants that they reconsider their position on the information about possible alternative sites, especially on Industrial Drive, that has been previously requested by this board and not yet received. As the applicant is likely already aware, if you weren't before, you certainly are after tonight, the matter of alternative sites is germane, not just to the variance applications, but also a factor in the balancing test to be conducted on the immunity from the zoning question under Monroe versus the City of Rochester. We have specified the information we are seeking previously. We would really, really like to have that information in hand in making our determination about immunity. And if necessary, later in making the determination on the variance applications. At this point, I will say thank you to everyone for attending. Come again November 5th.
Second.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Wait. Motion to adjourn. Okay, Tim seconded. Patty.
Yes, I'll second.
Henry.
You
He's
know
saying,
my feelings.
he's saying yes.
Yes.
Holly.
Yes.
And Joe.
Yes.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Good night.
Good night.
And Kevin,
Good
thank
night.
you again.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes. He's a very good host.
All right, have a great night, everybody. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Good night. Oops.